Hello, John McAdams here. Thanks a lot for joining me in this video. My good friend Joseph von Benedikt joins me on the show today to talk about his favorite cartridges for hunting darn near anything. Now, he and I play a little game in this episode where we each list our favorite cartridge and bullet for hunting specific species of game, ranging from Coues whitetail deer up to thick-skinned species of dangerous game like Cape buffalo and elephant, and almost everything in between mule deer, elk, black bear, things like that. Now, the catch to this game is that we cannot reuse a cartridge for multiple species, though we can reuse bullets if desired. Now, additionally, the last two categories we discuss are for our favorite all around hunting cartridges. So in those cases, it is permissible to use a cartridge listed previously. So you could, for instance, list the same cartridge as your favorite deer hunting cartridge and your favorite all-around hunting cartridge. But for the purposes of this game, it's not allowed to have the same cartridge be your favorite black bear and elk hunting cartridge. I know that's not the way it always works out in real life, but that's the way we're going to play it in this game. Now, I did not prep Joseph for this episode. I told him the very basic outline of what we were going to talk about literally 1 minute before we started recording. So he did all of this pretty well off the cuff. There were also a couple of instances where he and I each said we would ideally prefer to use a cartridge other than what we ultimately listed in this episode for hunting a particular animal. But we couldn't do that because we used that other cartridge for something else. So, even so, this discussion, I think, provides an interesting glimpse into the thought process we each use for selecting bullets and cartridges for different hunting situations. So, with all that out of the way, let's dive into this discussion with Joseph on our favorite cartridges for hunting darn near anything. Good morning, Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I know you've been feeling a little under the weather, but I'm glad that you're feeling good enough to talk to us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, John. Something to look forward to.
That's right. Well, so like we just talked about, I just gave you a sneak peek about this like 1 minute before we started recording, but you haven't had a lot more time to prepare other than that. We're going to talk about favorite cartridges today. So we're going to go through a bunch of different situations for different species of primarily North American game, but we'll talk a little bit about Africa too. We're going to talk your favorite cartridge and your favorite bullet for each of those species of game and under those different conditions. So I already have all of my favorite cartridges written out here. We'll see what yours are for each one of these, and then after you give me yours, I'll share mine with the audience. We can talk about it for a second. If there's anything to talk about with that situation, then we'll move on to the next one, if that sounds good to you.
Perfect.
All right, so first one, what is your favorite cartridge for hunting eastern whitetail deer? And we'll call it situations 150 yards and closer.
Okay, so in full disclosure, I don't have a lot of experience hunting eastern whitetail deer. I've done it a bit, but I've done a lot more whitetail hunting in the Midwest and then some across the West. But I would say, and I'm going to raise some eyebrows of some of my Western friends here, but if I had to choose just one to do that for the rest of my life, it'd be a 308.
That's funny. That was my choice as well. What is your bullet choice for that situation?
I'd probably go with 150 grain Nosler AccuBond, just because it's fairly fast shooting, flat. You don't ever have to worry about holdovers inside 200, 250 yards. It's got enough bullet weight, and combined with its bonded core construction, it'll drive through the vitals from any reasonable shot angle on a eastern whitetail.
Mm-hmm. So my choice for this one was a 165 grain Federal Fusion. I was thinking about an AccuBond too, but I've used the AccuBond for some of the other situations, and I can reuse it, but I didn't want to use it for everything. And it's one of these situations where there's a whole lot of stuff that'll work really well on whitetail deer, especially when your ranges aren't that far. I killed my first 2 deer with a 308, and I live out in East Texas. A lot of the situations I hunt deer in are just like this. I think I took my first shot over 100 yards. I think when I was in college or something, because it's just so thick out here. And man, the 308 just so wonderful for these sort of situations. It works in other stuff too, but I agree with you that this is just a wonderful situation for the 308. And I don't even mean that as far as damning by faint praise or anything either.
Sure.
So, all right, let's move to a little bit different situation. We'll call this more Western style hunting, mule deer or Western whitetail in situations where ranges are a little bit farther than what you would encounter, say, where I hunt or east of the Mississippi.
Mm. And this is not the all around favorite best for everything, right?
So, all right, that is a good point that you make here. This is You can reuse one cartridge that you would use for all around for everything and for this. So you can use it twice if it's for this one and for the all around one.
Sure. Okay, Western deer, whitetail, and mule deer. So I'm a little bit torn. I have this, I want to say my favorite, and yet I also want to say what I feel like maybe would be the most practical, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for this example, man, yeah, I think I'm just going to go with I'm going to go with my favorite, the 280 Ackley Improved. And it's just, I guess the reason is because it's broad spectrum capable, but it's really good for deer sized game. You can push a handy 7mm bullet with some good aerodynamics, pretty darn fast. It's inherently accurate, and it's very authoritative on deer sized game, to include such things as wild sheep, mountain goats, aoudad, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. What bullet would you pick if you had to pick one?
Hmm.
Pick one
You know,
just for deer.
just for deer. Yeah, I should have put a little bit of thought into this. My brain starts doing loop de loops and can't figure it out. You know what? 155 grain terminal ascent bullet by Federal.
All right. So you are not too far off from me in this respect. I chose a 270 Winchester here,
Mm,
145 grain ELDX. Once again, specific for deer. I think the 270, it is hard to top the 270 in that deer realm. Of course, the 270
yes.
works for bigger stuff and whatnot too, but if a guy wanted one cartridge to hunt nothing but deer all over the country, it'd be hard to go wrong with a 270 or really a 280 AI either.
Well, and I'll tell you, John, my close contender there was the other one I almost said was the 6.8 Western, which is another 270 caliber cartridge. It's just a little better with the heavy high BC bullets that do so well at extended ranges. So that was a very close runner up for me.
All right, fair enough. Good deal. I was wondering where the 280 would fall for you, and I was not surprised to see it on the western deer hunting. All right,
Sure.
so we'll stay out west here. What about pronghorn?
Okay. That's another challenging one. I want to say 25-06 because it's such a legendary cartridge across pronghorn country, but I confess I've never killed one with a 25-06, so I don't feel like I can honorably say that's my favorite, right? I do like something fast and flat shooting, but I also like a little better aerodynamics than most of the 25s the quarter bores are capable of providing. So I'm going to say the 6.5 Weatherby RPM.
Okay. And what bullet you like for that one?
I would go with a bonded core tipped bullet. I really don't care. Whichever the gun shot better, it'd be either 130 grain AccuBond or 130 grain Swift Sirocco 2.
Yeah, in this case, I went with the 6.5 Creedmoor, very plain vanilla 143 grain ELDX bullet.
So boring, John.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell
so practical.
I was preparing for a pronghorn hunt out in Colorado a couple years ago, and I wanted to take a 6.5 Creedmoor on that hunt, and I tried darn near everything that you could think of in that rifle. I was trying the terminal ascent, I was trying the different Barnes loads, all kinds of stuff, right? And honestly, the thing that shot by far the best out of that rifle was that 143 grain ELDX. And I'm like, why try and complicate it unnecessarily?
That's a great bullet for pronghorns. Good bullet for a lot of things. I shot a black bear in Montana after a gnarly climb up some pretty steep mountains with that the 6.5 Weatherby RPM and 143 grain ELDX. Worked fine.
About how fast is that Weatherby cartridge pushing 143 grain bullet?
Well, I think I'm trying to pull up in my brain here what Weatherby rates it at. They don't actually factory load that cartridge. So I think I was hand loading it to about 3150 at the time. That cartridge will shoot the 120s to 130s. They do a lot with hammer bullets and the Barnes 127 LRX and so forth. Like 3250 to low 33s. It's pretty spicy.
Yeah, yeah, especially compared to the old 6.5 Creedmoor, and it's pretty spicy even compared to the 6.5 PRC too, now that I think about it.
Yeah, you're doing like 500 feet per second more at the muzzle than the 6.5 Creedmoor is. It's significant.
All right, well, so once again, we'll stay out west here, moving on to the next one. What about those little Coues deer down in Arizona and New Mexico and Old Mexico?
You know, oh, they're so much fun to hunt, but generally you do have to reach out for them a bit. I think I've never shot one at less than, what was my closest shot? It would be 370 yards, something like that. And generally you're going to find your shot opportunities between, let's say, 350 and 500, sometimes 600 if you have the rifle and the skills to do it. So something with a lot of inherent accuracy and a good aerodynamic bullet, again, is real optimal. And I would just go with what I used on my last hunt in January, 6.5 PRC. And I'm going to pick the 147 grain Hornady ELD match bullet for that, because it's very high BC. They're very small animals, light boned, thin skinned, and a match type bullet. This is one of the few cases where I will choose a match type bullet because it's just a small animal and it gives you that little better accuracy, consistency, and a little, really, really good wind bucking ability.
Yeah, for the listeners' benefit here, that 147 grain ELD match bullet has a BC of 0.697. And as good as that 143 grain ELDX is, that's a whole lot better in that, or in terms of BC. And that PRC is pushing it still over 2,900 feet per second, and at least at an advertised velocity anyway.
And it just shoots in almost everything. I took a little Mossberg Patriot Predator rifle. Sorry, let me silence my phone. That's going to be obnoxious here. And it was shooting 3/4 inch groups, factory ammo, factory rifle. It was awesome. I love, a cartridge and bullet combination that almost always performs well in any rifle you put it in.
Yeah, so this, you mentioned having to make a confession on the pronghorn a minute ago. This is where I'm going to make mine. I haven't actually hunted anything with this cartridge yet, though I am hoping to do it soon. But I am very curious about the 22 Creedmoor with that 80 grain, either ELDX or ELD match bullet on a Coues deer.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because that would have been my second, another good choice. And when I was down there hunting Coues deer in January, I had just wrapped up a real deep research project that I wrote about for Shooting Times and podcasted about on my own podcast on the 22 Creedmoor. And I was so impressed with it that I was wishing I was hunting with one down there. I mean, I had a great setup, right? And it proved to be perfect. But just because I was at the time enamored with the 22 Creedmoor, I wish I had that.
Yeah, 100%. So what my hunting season looks like this fall is definitely going to depend on how the draws go. This is going to be a big week, or big couple of weeks coming out with Utah and Colorado and them releasing their results. And depending on how that goes, I may end up putting in for Coues deer in Arizona and going down there. And I'm in the early stages of working out my new Venatic rifle from Horizon Firearms in the 22 Creedmoor. Initial impressions are very good, and we'll see how things go in the next couple of months with it.
Cool.
So let's hit pause out west right now. We're going to go back. They're all over the country, but more east than west. What about feral hogs?
Mm. Broad spectrum, or are you going to give me any categories? Like we're talking including night hunting, just control efforts, or more like sporting efforts in California? What are we talking here?
Yeah, so when I think feral hogs, I think about the sort of hunting in the areas where they are most prevalent, say out east. You can do it at night, and that's the cartridge that I'm going to pick here. I'll tell you here in a second and let you think about it some more. This is what I hunt them with where I live at night and during the day. 300 blackout and an AR-15, 110 grain Barnes TAC TX bullet.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Very good choice. So in that light where there's a lot of control and nighttime hunting is potentially available, if I hadn't already picked the 308 for eastern whitetail, I would have said a Ruger SFAR, small frame AR, and 308 with night vision compatible optical setup. But since I can't have that, I would say I'm with you. 300 blackout, a lightweight-ish monometal bullet, suppressed with night vision gear that's somehow either swappable or convertible to, good daytime use.
Yeah, so I have a Pulsar thermal scope on my AR, run the Banish 30 on it, and nice thing about it, nice thermal scope like that is it works just as good during the day as it does at night.
Yeah.
It just looks the same. You can video the hunt and all that stuff, and it's always nice too when you shoot one and it runs off. You can bring the video back and look. All right, where are my crosshairs actually on this thing when I hit it?
Yeah.
And it could be definitely reassuring when one runs off and you see, okay, I did make a good shot on it, and then you go and check and it's 30 yards away out in the woods. No big deal.
Sure. Excuse me.
Okay, so next two are going to be very similar. We're going to talk black bear over bait, black bear spot and stalk.
Okay, for black bear over bait, I'm taking a 45-70 lever action with a good low power optic on it, probably like a 1 to 4x something or other. And I would load it with 300 grain Barnes triple shock bullets, probably in their Pioneer factory ammo. Just a tremendous hard hitting load, very good for close, fast work. For spot and stalk type black bear hunting, gosh, there's a lot of different scenarios you can get yourself in there. You can stand up a bear in a patch of acorns in the fall or berries. You can, come face to face one while crossing an avalanche chute, or you can be glassing that avalanche chute from the other side of the canyon. So, I'm going to go real practical on this one and say I don't think you can beat a grand old 30-06 rifle for all around bear hunting, black bear hunting.
What bullet?
And
What
I'd
bullet you think?
probably 180 grain Nosler partition would be my choice.
All right, very good. Yeah, and that is the interesting thing about bears is you can have so many different situations. You can shoot one at 20 yards, or you can shoot one at 6, 7, 800 yards, depending on the details.
Yeah.
I have never hunted bears over hounds before, but would you use that same 45-70 setup on a hound hunt as you would a baited hunt?
Sure would. In fact, I did. My last bear I shot was not quite a year ago here in Idaho. Hunted over hounds with a 45-70, and it just worked tremendously.
Yeah, so my choice was also a 45-70 with a 300 grain Barnes over bait. My
Great
barn.
minds and all.
That's right. Yep. My Marlin 1895 is an older one that does not have a threaded barrel on it, so I wouldn't put a suppressor on it. But that's nice to have. I thought that was really cool that you shot yours with a Banish 46, right?
Yes, and it's fantastic. If you're prowling through alder thickets in Alaska, maybe you want the suppressor gone and a shorter barrel. But in a case like that, your point of impact shift, the little bit you're going to get when you take that suppressor off, just not a big deal. Carry your thread protector in your pocket, and if you have to follow something into alders, spin the suppressor off, put it in your pack, and go in with a short barrel.
So that particular Marlin 1895 that you used on that hunt, how long was the barrel on it?
18 inches.
Okay.
Which is my favorite length for a 45-70.
Yeah, that's a good balance of short, but not too short and not too long either.
Yep.
Mine, I think, is a little bit longer than that. I have a a little bit unusual one. I think it was a limited production run that they did, half round, half octagon barrel, full length magazine, and
Nice.
the barrel's not super long or anything, but I think it's longer than 18 inches. I want to say 20, maybe 22 inches. But thing's a thumper. I've killed a lot of stuff with that rifle, and it's worked really well for me.
Outstanding.
As far as spot and stalk goes, I picked a 7mm Remington Magnum 160 grain Accubon bullet for this one.
Yeah, that'd be real good too.
Okay, what do you think about elk?
I love elk.
I love elk too.
Okay, so cartridge and bullet for elk. This is another tricky one, and I'm going to tell you what I think is probably the most practical, and then I'll tell you what my favorite is because they're different. And here's the funny thing. I've shot as many mature bulls with a 300 Winchester Magnum as I have with all other cartridges combined. And that's a fair number of elk, right? It just flat out works. And in that cartridge, any good controlled expansion 180 grain bullet will work just fine. And that's probably the most practical choice there is for all-purpose stuff. If you're kind of on the cutting edge of the shooting industry and you like the better cartridge design, the greater efficiency, the heavier high BC bullets, I would definitely opt for the 300 PRC instead. Just a fantastic elk clobbering cartridge. That's it. Oh, and in that one, I'd probably shoot one of, let's see, Federal has a new terminal ascent bullet that's optimized for that cartridge, 210 grains or something like that. Really good. Or the 208 grain Barnes LRX bullet. Yeah. Yes. Now, all that said, my favorite cartridge to hunt elk with is a 300 H&H. It's just fantastic. It's retro. Mm-hmm. It's almost 100 years old. It is 100. Let me think. No, the 375 H&H is 100 years old, 102. The 300 H&H, known as the Super 30, the original 30 caliber Magnum. I'll have to go back and look up some dates, but it's nearing 100 years old, 80 to 100. And I have shot some good bulls with that cartridge. I love how smooth feeding it is. Contrary to expectations with that real highly tapered case and so forth, it tends to be inherently accurate. They shoot real well. And, well, I'll give you my favorite retro bullet choice and then my go-to modern bullet. For retro, I shoot a 220 grain round nose. The rifle loves them. They hit super hard. They don't penetrate real well unless you go with the nozzler partition version. But for a more cutting edge, longer range modern bullet, I really like Federal's factory load with 180 grain trophy bonded tip. Super good load.
All right, so 300 H&H is your final answer for this one?
Final answer. Lock it in, John.
There you go. Yeah, so for me, this is one of those situations like you described here earlier for the 280 or the hog or whatever. The choice I'm going to make here is affected by the choices I'm making for other things, not being able to use the same thing more than once.
Right.
All other things, if I just wanted to pick my favorite cartridge to hunt elk and I didn't have to worry about any of those other arbitrary limitations I put on it, I would have gone with a 300 Win Mag. But in this case, I went with a 7mm PRC. And hopefully I will actually get to use it this year, depending on how the draws and whatnot go. I'm very curious to see how that 170 grain terminal ascent bullet from Federal works out on elk.
It'll be terrific. That's a fantastic bullet. I've used that bullet on Aoudad, and it's super impressive.
I'm making an effort this year to hunt as many things with different 7 PRC factory loads as possible. And
cool.
That is one of them that's on the list. The soon to be announced Barnes load is going to be on the list. The new Core-Lokt tip, Federal fusion tip, all that stuff.
Okay, sure.
So it's just a matter of getting the tags and doing the hunts and whatnot.
That's a rough life.
Yep. So for me, the reason I didn't pick the 300 Win Mag for elk was because I used the 300 Win Mag with the 200 grain terminal ascent for moose. What is your choice there?
For moose?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to be a little unconventional here and not go with, one of the common ones. 300 Win Mag, any of those work great for moose. But the rifle that I built for myself specifically for hunting moose was inspired by an experience where I shot a real good bullet, 205 yards, and then this was morning 4 of a 10-day hunt. Night of day 9, my hunting partner shot another good bull at 611 yards, and we hunted extremely hard that whole time. It's DIY, drop camp in real remote country, and I was shooting a 375 H&H, and I could not have reached out and shot that bull he shot. He used a 7mm STW, and so I went home and did some thinking, and usually in Alaska, at least, moose are hunted in grizzly country. And so I wanted something big enough to, shoot a grizzly with if I ever get fortunate enough to hold a tag up there, or just defend myself against some, bad encounter with a bear. And I arrived with the 338 Remington Ultra Magnum. Not a common cartridge anymore, but it generates as much or even more muzzle energy than the 375 H&H does. It'll shoot those real aerodynamic 250 to 300 grain 338 bullets that are good, tough, controlled expansion bullets with plenty of reach to give you 600 or even a bit more capability, 600-yard capability. You'll have lots of velocity on arrival, lots of energy on arrival, and so that's what I went with. It's not super easy to shoot well. It's a heavy recoiler, right? But it's an extremely impressive cartridge from the muzzle to as far out as you can hit something with it.
You make a very good point about the possibility of running into a grizzly bear out there on the hunt. And it's kind of like, and we'll talk more about this later, but hunting, say, plains game in Africa in an area where there's no dangerous game versus where there's one where you might encounter a buffalo or an elephant or something. And
sure,
what you're going to carry in one situation might not be the ideal for use in the other situation. And so that is a good point about moose living in areas where that is a consideration. You're not likely to have to shoot a bear in self-defense out there, but man, if you do, you're going to really need you're going to need that performance.
Sure. And if you're an Alaska resident, you may hold a grizzly tag every fall, and you want something that's really got, good bear clobbering capability. My choice of bullet for that is, assuming your rifle shoots it well, would be a 250 grain Barnes LRX.
Okay. How fast is that 338 rum pushing that 250 LRX?
Oh, I'd have to go back and consult my notes. I think it's nearly 2,900 feet per second.
Ooh, man.
It's pretty smoky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's screaming then. Yeah. And I can understand how that would hit hard on both ends too.
Yes.
Well, kind of following up on that situation, what about you're going out specifically hunting for brown or grizzly bear?
Okay. So grizzly bear, is less of a challenge. I don't think people differentiate them enough. It's less of a challenge, I should say, to a cartridge and bullet. Sometimes harder to hunt, as I understand, but a good 338 with a controlled expansion bullet, I think, is pretty darn good for the mountain grizzlies, the interior bears. But when you're talking coastal bears, it can be 1,000 pounds and up, and maybe as much as half again that much in rare cases. I think more is called for, and you're not going to be taking super long shots on those very dangerous, potentially dangerous animals. So unless you're trying to stop something that's wounded and trying to escape, probably never going to shoot past 200 yards for your initial contact shot. So 375 Holland and Holland is my cartridge of choice for that. And I think I'd probably load it with, a 300 grain Barnes triple shock, or possibly a 270 grain LRX with as a third runner-up would be a 300 grain Nosler AccuBond.
All right, just write down all your answers here so we can share them with the audience. Yeah, for me in this situation, once again, right, it depends, but kind of limited by the other choices we made. I went with a 338 Win Mag, 250 grain partition here.
Yep, good choice.
Now, part of the reason why I did not use a 375 H&H there was because I used it on this next one, which is bison, which I did not tell you about before you had that question. So, with all that in mind, what do you think about cartridges for bison.
I don't have to be practical, do I?
Nope, you don't.
475 Turnbull.
There you go. Very, very classic cartridge. Or not necessarily a classic cartridge in the sense that it's old, but that sort of feel to it.
Quintessential.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good word, yes.
And 400 grain Barnes triple shock there. Barnes actually worked with Doug Turnbull to design an optimum triple shock bullet for the 475 Turnbull. I've seen it work on Cape Buffalo and various plains game from warthog up, so I know what it'll do.
Now, for the audience members who are not familiar with the 475 Turnbull, can you give them a one-paragraph description of what that cartridge is?
Sure. Doug Turnbull, several decades ago, wanted to generate a better high-octane lever-action cartridge. So he necked down, I believe it's a 5090 cartridge case, turned it into a bottleneck case that will hold 475 diameter bullets, typically bullets designed for double-barreled express rifles designed for dangerous game hunting in Africa. And it shoots them anywhere from about 1,800 to 2,200 feet per second, depending on bullet weight. My rifle has a 26-inch barrel, will hold 6 in the magazine. So 7 in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber. Yeah, it's a lot of cartridges. So assuming you can run a lever action fast, you've got a ton of firepower. I've loaded everything from 275 grain light bullets designed for the 475 line ball and the 480 Ruger revolvers, right up to the 500 grain cartridges designed for, or bullets designed for the 470 Nitro Express. It's a ton of fun with all of them. My choices for most stuff is that 400 grain Barnes. For the really big stuff, like if I was using this cartridge on bear, I'd go with a 500 grain Swift A-frame.
All right, very good. Now, you have actually killed a Cape Buffalo with a 475 Turnbull, haven't you?
And a hippo, yeah.
Yeah, so you're not some guy just pulling stats off the internet saying that you like this cartridge, huh?
No, I love it. It's extraordinary. It's very impractical for the average person that's buying ammo down at the local hardware store, and they're not hard to find, or not easy to find. The rifles aren't, but it's a very cool, very capable cartridge. And there's an iconic film somewhere of Doug Turnbull shooting a bison with one and just drops it with one shot in a big pile of dust. It's amazing.
Yeah, see, do I understand correctly that the 475 Turnbull was Doug Turnbull's attempt to make a cartridge that would meet that 4,000 foot-pound minimum legal kinetic energy at the muzzle for hunting thick-skinned dangerous game in Africa and have it work in a standard lever-action rifle?
That sounds right.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we have gotten bigger, bigger, bigger. Now we're going to take a turn and we're going to go a lot smaller, but very different situation. Sheep/mountain goat hunting.
Okay. So I see what you did to me there. I've used up some of my probable favorite choices. I would have probably gone with the 280 Ackley Improved for sheep and goat if I hadn't already used that up. But purely because those hunts can be so crucial, and sometimes you work so hard for an opportunity, and yet it's a long way off. Whether a long way for you is 400 yards or 650 yards doesn't really matter. A cartridge that shoots a bullet that bucks the wind well and maintains a lot of energy downrange, but isn't hard to shoot, is crucial. So I think here's where I'll use up my 7mm PRC ace in the hole.
All right.
And I would run that on sheep and goats, probably just with 175 grain Hornady ELDX bullet, or the 170 Terminal Sense fantastic bullet, or that new Barnes one you mentioned that's coming out. But neither of those animals are super huge bodied. Goats have a reputation for being tough, but they're also kind of slab sided. They're not super deep from side to side. So having penetration that you measure in feet rather than 12 to 14 inches isn't necessarily crucial. So yeah, I think the 175 ELDX would be a good choice.
All right. Yeah, so this is another one of these where I haven't actually had the opportunity to hunt sheep or mountain goat myself, so I'm just I'm just making an educated guess on what I would use if the opportunity arose. I would use the 6.5 PRC here. Probably 143 grain ELDX. I could be convinced to use other things, talking to guys like you that have done it before. I also remember hearing a story, I think on your podcast, with a guy that was sheep hunting in Alaska, I think with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and had to kill a grizzly bear that came after him, and he was using a 127 grain Barnes LRX. And so, if I was hunting in Alaska or a place in Canada where that was a possibility, I might have to deal with that. Maybe I would use the Barnes. Otherwise, I would probably just use the plain old ELTX. Maybe a burger bullet. What do you think about one of the burgers on sheep?
I like it for sheep, and I think you'd be served very well on broadside shots for goat.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to take a steeply quartering shot on goat, I would worry a bit, but you'd probably be okay.
Now, you shot your sheep. You shot a desert bighorn with the 6.5 PRC a couple years ago, right?
A Rocky Mountain bighorn.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
And I have not. I mean, full disclosure, I have not had the opportunity to hunt mountain goat.
All right.
Bucket list.
So you shot that sheep with the 6.5 PRC. What bullet did you use in that case?
130 grain Federal Terminal Ascent bullet.
And it sounds like you were
fantastic.
Pretty pleased with that.
Yes, 100%.
All right. So for the listeners that are interested in learning more about that, episode 174, Joseph actually came on my podcast and talked about that particular sheep hunt in detail. So you went with the 7 PRC, 175 grain ELDX. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful choice too. I mean, heck, if I drew a sheep tag this year, and I'm sure I won't, but I'd be tempted to use that cartridge and something along those lines for a bullet too. Okay, let's go across the pond from North America to Africa. Hunting plains game, dangerous game is not a possibility for you. So just the whole variety of plains game, the stuff you'd normally be hunting over there. What cartridge do you like for that?
Geez, I've used up most of my favorites. I'm going to go back to the practical side, and since my final answer for elk was the 300 H&H, I'm going to say the 300 Winchester Magnum is just a tremendous all-purpose cartridge for hunting in Africa on the vast spectrum of plains game.
All right. What bullet you like here?
200 grain Federal Terminal Ascent.
Yeah, I have had a number of clients come over with either a 300 Win Mag or a 300 Short Mag with that 200 grain Terminal Ascent, and oh my gosh, it's just worked fantastic. Those guys, that was the first experience with that bullet for my PHs and whatnot over there. And they're like, God, this thing is amazing. What is it? I was like, well, it's a trophy bonded bear claw that's kind of fancied up a little bit and got a new name. Like, oh, well, that's why it worked so well then.
Yeah, really optimized for aerodynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've used that bullet. I think I shot 16 animals, mostly management animals, on one safari, just doing bullet testing. And in the interest of journalistic research, because it's designated as an extended range bullet, right? I shot oryx from 15 yards to 997 yards with that. Ooh. I don't like to shoot that far. I rarely do it, but I shoot a super accurate custom rifle that shot that bullet very well. And my PH and I set up in just the right position where we could do it as ethically as possible. And my word, it worked. Yeah.
And you said that was a 300 Win Mag with the 200 Terminal Ascent that you made that long shot with?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the bullets recovered from oryx at 15 yards and 520 yards and 315 yards and 997 yards all look perfect. It's unbelievable how much integrity that bullet has.
How often of those 16 animals that you shot, you said most of them the bullet exited and you recovered, you say 4 bullets?
Yeah. And most of the ones that I recovered were steeply quartering. Generally, I'd shoot one on the point of the shoulder and we'd find it back against the hide and kind of just in front of the hip.
Okay, yeah. Whew. That's quite a bit of penetration, especially after blasting through that front shoulder blade like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, very good. So in this case, I went very plain vanilla, 30-06, 180 grain partition.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sometimes it pays to be cutting edge and real sexy, and other times it doesn't. And I think this is one that would work really well. I considered using a 300 Win Mag here too, but for if I were hunting, say in the Kalahari or something like that, I would lean more towards the 300 Win Mag. But in thicker country where I wouldn't be as likely to be taking something past 200 yards, I like the 30-06.
Sure.
All right, you're going to Africa, thick-skinned, dangerous game, safari. What are you bringing for your buffalo, your elephant, your hippo, all that sort of stuff? Not going to hunt plains game with this cartridge.
Well, I'm not affluent enough to have a double rifle, and so we'll just leave that out. Plus, I confess I'm a little bit of a, the traditionalists would say a magazine rifle man.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us would say bolt action rifle guy, just because you can put an optic on it and you can switch loads and adjust that optic's sighting, to be aim, point impact. That's hard to do with a double rifle, and you get a little more reach. I do like the fact that you can usually have 3 to 5 cartridges on tap, but I'm getting off on a tangent here. I would pick probably the 416 Remington Magnum for practical purposes, because it'll run in a smaller action than a 416 Rigby. The other really good option, if you're kind of on, if you're buying a rifle to go as well, would be the 416 Ruger, because their Hawkeye African is the best value out there in a controlled feed, traditional walnut stalked, polished blue, express sighted rifle for Africa. But I have a really, really nice 416 Remington Magnum. Love the cartridge. Big variety of factory loads available for it, so you can find a good expanding bullet that shoots well through your rifle, and a deep penetrating solid that will hit more or less the same point of impact out to 100 yards. So yeah, I would choose that one, and I would go with, all things considered, a 400 grain Swift A-frame for my soft, and then probably a Barnes banded solid for my follow-up shots.
All right, very good.
Or pachyderms, I'd use the solid on elephant.
Mm-hmm. All right, fair enough. Yeah, for this one, it was a challenging thing for me here too. If money were no object and I could have a double and all that, that'd be one thing, and I could see myself going with a 470 or a 450, 400 or something along those lines. But as this is the real world and my funds and whatnot are limited, I slid over to the 458 Win Mag here. Go with the 500 grain DGX bonded / DGS from Hornady.
Great choice as well.
Now, so these are the last two questions that are coming up. You can reuse cartridges here. So we're going to talk about your choice for the best all-around hunting cartridge, not including dangerous game. So if you're hunting things other than thick-skinned dangerous game like buffalo, we'll a cartridge for that. And then one cartridge that you're going to hunt everything with to include dangerous game. And both of these can be reuses from earlier. You don't have to select a single bullet for either one of them.
Okay. So for the broad spectrum rifle, I'm going to say the 280 Ackley Improved, just because I've used it for so many years with such great results. A more practical choice for some, even many hunters these days, would be the 7mm PRC. Gives a little more velocity, and in the future will be probably available in a broader spectrum of factory loads. But right now you can get 12 to 14 different factory loads for the 280 Ackley. It's a fantastic cartridge to hand load, very well behaved, easy to get top accuracy out of at premium velocity, and I just love it. You get 5 down in the magazine in a well-built rifle. You can build a nice light rifle. You can get something like a Weatherby Backcountry 2.0 that's weighs less than a magician's wand. It's just such a fantastic cartridge, and you can shoot things like moose and bison with it with careful bullet selection. As for the Hunt Round the World cartridge, my sentimental side says the 9.3x62, but I'm actually going to pick the 375 H&H because it's easier to find ammunition for. It does give you a little bit more authority, which can be significant, I think, if you were to hunt elephant. Rhino isn't really a consideration for most of us anymore, but certainly would be a benefit if you did have that opportunity. And it's got a little better velocity for extended range performance on things like kudu, mule deer, whatever. So yeah, final answer would be a 375 H&H for my worldwide one rifle for everything.
Yes, I already had the 280 Ackley penciled in for you for your best all around cartridge.
You know me too well, John.
I was not surprised with the 375 H&H. So for the dangerous game one, or the one to include dangerous game, I was going back and forth between the 9.3 and the 375 myself. I opted to go with the 9.3. In terms of the sheer variety of game I've taken with that cartridge, gosh, I mean, it's hands down. I mean, I've killed a lot of stuff with the 300 Win Mag, and the 7 PRCs is catching up too, but both of them got a long way to go to catch up to that 9.3 in terms of just the sheer weight of game I have taken with the 9.3.
It's a fantastic cartridge.
It is, and I got a rifle that I really like in it that shoots well. It just fits me well, and it's got just everything about it. I just like. And
yeah. If I can throw it out there, John, we didn't talk about cartridges for Europe, but if I was going to choose one for everything from driven wild boar to hunting Eurasian brown bear in Europe, it would definitely be a 9.3x62. Over there, ammo is widely available, very respected cartridge, and it would be optimal for that, I would think.
I've corresponded with several Europeans, especially guys in Scandinavia, and talk a lot about how that is one of the more popular cartridges, especially the guys that go after Scandinavian moose. Not everybody uses it, of course, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And so for my best all-around caliber, not including dangerous game, I went with the 7 PRC here.
Okay. Yeah, great choice.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think the advent of the 7 PRC is going to have any effect on the 280 Ackley Improved, how widely available it is?
I wondered that initially, but I don't think it is. The 280 Ackley has kind of a cult following, and people understand its advantages, where you're getting basically 7mm Magnum performance in a cartridge that fits in a small petite action. You can get a bunch of ammo in the magazine. You're going to hold 1 to 2 more cartridges than any Magnum can, because it's a 30-06 size case head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit less powder for very similar performance. So you got longer barrel life, less recoil. You're burning up less components if you're a hand loader. I think it's going to stay strong. The one I do think that the 7 PRC regrettably is kind of squelching is the 6.8 Western.
Yeah. I receive a lot of feedback from listeners and whatnot on that 6.8 Western versus 7 PRC debate a lot. And
yeah.
There's a lot of emotion wrapped up in it, and there's a lot of people that will just go out of their way to use something that's not made by Hornady, regardless of how good it is and whatnot. And it does. I don't know what's going on with the 6.8 Western, but it is unfortunate that the cartridge is having kind of the problems that it is, and I don't know why that is. But if Nosler,
which one now?
The 6.8 Western.
Okay. Say
if Nosler and Barnes picked up that cartridge and started also offering ammo, and Federal and Remington too, it'd be a whole different ball game. And I don't quite understand why that really hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's still just lingering effects of the 2020 ammo shortage.
It sure could be. I did have a representative at Barnes told me they're spun up, tooled up, ready to go. They have a bullet generated for that cartridge, 170 or 71 grain, something like that. But they haven't been able to source brass yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be part of the answer. But yeah, I think the fact that there is so much fervor and emotion over that juxtaposition between the 6.8 Western and the 7 PRC is actually a good sign for the 6.8 Western. Tells you that a lot of people have used it and have had good enough results with it that they're thoroughly invested. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a very good sign for the long life potential of that cartridge.
I felt real bad for whoever was running Winchester and Browning's social media profiles when they announced that cartridge in early 2021, because I mean, just the hate being thrown at those people. Oh, why are you making this new cartridge? Why don't you just make more 270 ammo? Blah, 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 blah. And that was a lot of the reaction I saw just from the regular public But on the flip side of things, I've never met anybody that had a 6.8 Western and hunted with it that did not like it.
Yeah. Yep. It's fantastic.
Yep. So we'll see what the future holds for it. But hopefully it'll pull through, and some other companies are going to pick it up here soon. And in 10 years, it'll be something that's a lot more widely available than is, it's already somewhat in wide use right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have talked a lot today over the last 45 minutes about everything from hunting Coues deer and whitetail deer out east to elephant and Cape buffalo and whatnot in Africa. Talked about a lot of cartridges. Very interesting choices that you made. Some of them I predicted, but others were a little bit of a curveball, like that 338 rum. But when you explained it for the moose and everything, your thought process for that was made sense. Hopefully the audience enjoyed this. I'm sure they would. Everyone likes talking about calibers and bullets and all of that stuff. And it's always good fun having you on the show and talking to you about this stuff.
Thanks, John.
So, Joseph, you have your own podcast, your own YouTube channel, all of that stuff. Where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
Sure. Well, as you said, I've got the podcast. It's called the Backcountry Hunting Podcast. You can find it on all the standard listening apps. You can find it online if you just Google it. And we also have just transferred over into YouTube. We're just kind of dabbling in it. My boy William, he's our backcountry apprentice. He's always helped with some of the sponsored segments in the show, and he's always done the most popular segments, just simple, fundamental skills and stories, and people love him. He's in his mid-teens, but he's already technologically more savvy than I am. So the YouTube side's kind of his little baby. Would love to have any of you interested go over there and just search Backcountry Hunting Podcast on YouTube and subscribe for his sake, just to help him out, help him grow that. It's been doing pretty well. We're about 6 weeks in and pleased with the results. It's mostly just fun, but as far as the podcast goes, that's where the bread and butter of my audio information comes out, right? We're heavy on, kind of like you are, in cartridges, bullets, as well as how-to skills, shooting skills, rifle setup, optics, and always laced with some good old hunting stories. And then I write full-time for Peterson's Hunting, Shooting Times, Rifle Shooter Magazine, Guns and Ammo special interest pubs that you'll find in your local grocery store, all of that. Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Well, I subscribe to your YouTube channel. I listen to your podcast as well. I enjoy it when it comes out on Friday. I know a lot of people that listen to my show listen to yours as well, but if you are not already listening to the Backcountry Hunting Podcast, make sure that you are. Check it out. I will put links in the show notes or the video description to that, as well as your YouTube channel. Joseph, it is always a pleasure talking to you and having you on the show. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
It's always an honor, John. Tons of fun.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that discussion as much as Joseph and I enjoyed recording it. So to recap, Eastern whitetail deer, both of us selected the 308 Winchester. I picked a 165 Federal Fusion bullet. Joseph picked 150 grain Accubon. For mule deer / Western whitetail, I chose a 270 with 145 grain ELDX. Joseph chose the 280 Ackley Improved, 155 grain Terminal Ascent. For antelope, I chose a 6.5 Creedmoor, 143 grain ELDX. Joseph chose a 6.5 Weatherby RPM, 130 grain Accubon or Swift Sirocco 2. For Coues deer, I chose a 22 Creedmoor, 80 grain ELDX. Joseph chose a 6.5 PRC with 147 grain ELD match bullet. For feral hogs, we both went with a 300 Blackout. I went with 110 grain TAC TX. So did he. He also said the 308 would have been his alternate there. Black Bear over bait. Both of us, 4570, 300 grain Barnes TSX. Spot and Stalk Black Bear. I chose a 7mm Remington Magnum, 160 grain Accubon. In that case, Joseph went with a 30-06, 180 grain Partition. For elk, I chose 7mm PRC, 170 grain Terminal Ascent. He ultimately settled on the 300 H&H, 180 grain Trophy Bonded Tip, but he also talked about how much he liked the 300 Win Mag and the 300 PRC in those situations as well. For moose, I chose a 300 Win Mag, 200 grain Terminal Ascent. Joseph selected a 338 Remington Ultra Magnum, 250 grain Barnes LRX. For brown / grizzly bear, I chose a 338 Win Mag, 250 grain Partition. He selected a 375 H&H with either a 300 grain TSX or a 270 grain Barnes LRX. For bison, I selected a 375 H&H with a 300 grain Barnes TSX bullet. Joseph picked a 475 Turnbull 400 grain TSX. For sheep and mountain goat, I went with the 6.5 PRC with either 127 grain Barnes LRX or a 143 grain ELDX. Joseph selected the 7 PRC here with a 175 grain ELDX. For Africa, plains game only, I went with the tried and true 30-06 180 grain partition. He selected a 300 Win Mag, 200 grain terminal ascent. Thick skin dangerous game, I went with a 458 Win Mag, 500 grain DGX/DGS. He went with a 416 Remington or 416 Ruger, but the Remington was his number one choice, 400 grain Swift A-frame. Best all-around hunting caliber, not including dangerous game, I went with the 7 PRC. He went with the 280 Ackley Improved. Best all-around caliber, including dangerous game, I went with a 9.3 by 62. He went with a 375 H&H. A lot of very interesting similarities and differences in those choices. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel right now and hit that like button, both buttons right below the video. Now, I've put links below the video to articles I've written on some of my favorite rifles and ammo recommendations, as well as other pieces of hunting gear like slings, ear protection, scopes, stuff like that. Be sure to check out those articles. Now, for more detailed information on popular hunting cartridges and what they're best suited for, click the link in the description below or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there to get a free ebook I have written on the best hunting cartridges. Now, I'm going to turn it over to you. What did you think about Joseph's and my favorite hunting cartridges for those different situations? What cartridges have you used for taking some of those different species of game, and what ammo and rifle did you use in each case? Let me know by leaving a comment on this video right now. Also, feel free to leave a comment letting me know what you thought about this episode format with JVB and I having a freewheeling discussion like this. If you liked it, and if you want me to do more episodes along those lines, let me know, and also be sure to tell me who else you would like to talk about this in future videos. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and good hunting.